Hello and welcome to Wrestle Boys. Today we're looking at AJPW, that's All Japan Pro Wrestling, featuring Virtua. This is on the Sega Saturn. I picked up this game last weekend at a video game market, and it's a weird one. This is an official All Japan Pro Wrestling game. That's one of the main Japanese wrestling promotions next to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And it features some guest wrestlers, which, I mean, I'm sure you can guess from the title. It features two characters from the Virtua Fighter series, which is weird. This is like a super serious wrestling game. There they are. That's Jeffrey and Wolf from Virtua Fighter, who are kind of wrestler characters. But yeah, it's a super serious wrestling game, more serious than most. It's actually a really, really great wrestling game. I'd never played this before. It's not one of the... a lot of wrestling games kind of share an engine. You know, the WCW games and the WWF games on the N64 share an engine. Well, some of them share an engine. And then that was used for other wrestling games, some of the Japanese wrestling games, etc., etc. This isn't. This is the first wrestling game I've played that plays like this. It actually plays really well. Yeah, I'm kind of in love with it. So I wanted to jump in and have a look at it, really, and do some wrestling. So needless to say, this is a Japan-only release. You can't buy this outside of Japan. It's a Japanese promotion that isn't generally watched out much outside of Japan, so that's kind of fair enough. But luckily, there's not much to understand in there. There's not much Japanese text you need to understand. You can find FAQs online that tell you the moves and how to play the game. But here's our roster. So the thing I love about this is that massive space in the middle for Giant Baba. Look, he's a tall guy and he's important. He's one of the founders of AJPW. You know, yeah, just give him the same space on the screen as four other characters, and then you've got Stan Hansen. And you've got, there we are, Jeffrey and Wolf from Virtua Fighter. Just odd. They're little CG pictures next to all these proper wrestlers. I'm going to play Hansen for definite. So these are the 11 guys that I'm going to have to run through in my little career mode that I'm playing here. And what other information? I mean, it's all in Japanese, isn't it? We can see that forward A is his special move. That's his drop kick. So here's the entrances. I think the game looks really, really good. The kind of heavily compressed JPEG of the crowd in the background is maybe a little crappy, but I think the game looks quite good. It's got a good style. We do have to watch him climb into the ropes from every single angle, which is maybe a bit much. But yeah, it's got a nice feeling about it. It feels realistic. Like, I guess this is a CD platform, obviously. So they've got the actual like voices of the announcer announcing the wrestlers, and you know, the referee shouting things. It's got licensed music in it. So unlike a lot of the well-known wrestling games from this generation, which were mostly on the Nintendo 64, they were super cool and you know, they played amazing. They're probably the best wrestling games of all time. But they didn't have any speech in them and things because they were cartridge based, and you generally didn't get that kind of thing on that platform. So that's a nice little feature of this. I just think the visual style's amazing. The lighting looks great. All the colours look good. It just like, I mean, obviously it's got the visuals that from a Sega Saturn game, so it doesn't look perfect. But I think they've done a really great job with the look of it, and it feels great to play. I mean, when we get into this, I'll explain more. But it's smooth. Yeah, it feels like a wrestling match, which seems like a stupid and obvious thing to say, but some wrestling games feel like fighting games. Some just, I don't know, wrestling's a weird thing to translate into a game because it's not just about beating your opponent. It's heavily about putting on a good match and, you know, taking your time and entertaining the crowd, and there's all these things, the theatrical element of it, which sometimes doesn't translate well to a video game. But I think this game's done it really well, and there's a few little things they've put in it which plays up to that theatrical thing. The loading times are horrific. That's what I'll say. Okay, here we go. So I mean, first of all, it's from a side view, like a fighting game would be, which most wrestling games are kind of take on more of an isometric view or from a bit higher up. But I think this works well. So, first of all, you'll see it's got a counter system very similar to the modern WWE 2K games. So you can hit B to counter a move, any grapple, Irish whip there we saw. I think that's a good system, and it works well in the 2K games. It works well here. It's kind of hard to pull off, but it does mean that you're not just stuck in these animations every time your opponent tries to grapple you. So the other thing, and when I talk about the theatrical aspect of wrestling, you can see in the middle, at the top of the screen, there's this little bar, which at the minute just looks like a little blue dot, but that's like a crowd reaction bar, and it shows you who the crowd are kind of playing up to, and who the crowd are shouting for. And you actually hear, as the match goes on, you actually hear the crowd start chanting for one of the wrestlers. They'll start chanting for Akiyama, because he's the computer player who's miles better than me. And when the crowd are chanting for you, and when that little blue bar is in your favour, it's much easier to pin your opponent. If the crowd aren't on your side, it's actually very, very difficult to pin. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's a really cool feature, and you don't often see that in wrestling games. But actually playing up to the crowd and and trying to get the crowd on your side. I mean, that is a wrestling thing. That's totally accurate to how it is. So we've got a bit of a health bar and a strength bar. The little meter that's got a percentage next to it, very similar to like a Capcom fighter or something. That's like a super bar. When you fill up a block of that, you can do your special move. In Stan Hansen's case, that's the drop kick. And then we've got a time in the middle, which is minutes. I think that's just minutes. But yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by it, because I think they've made a great product, and it's kind of weird that they haven't gone on to make other wrestling games that I've seen and heard of since, because it's actually really, really good. So that's a taunt there. So you can hit the L button to do a taunt. Or, I mean, playing up to the crowd, really, to try and get them on your side. You can see now that they're well on Akiyama's side. They're not on Hansen's side at all. I love the kind of digitised crowd noises and the digitised referee as well, like his things that he's shouting out. It just all adds up to this quite realistic feeling and quite accurate, quite authentic wrestling game. So that just showed up is when one of your body parts gets really damaged. It can be your back or limbs, and it'll warn you that you've broken a limb, or you've really damaged a part of you. And if you get a couple of breakages, the ref can actually stop the match, which isn't happening here. But yeah, it's something to note. If you just keep hammering your opponent and causing breakages, you can actually just get the match called off. So that's the pin from Akiyama, and obviously nowhere near as good as the computer is. But I'm still learning. I'm learning to be a better wrestler. I just think it's a fascinating game. It's wrestling games are weird. They're a bit of a roller coaster. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. You've got your Fire Pros and you've got your classic N64, like your WCW versus NWO Nitro and WWF WrestleMania 2000. Those real well-known cult classics that are on that platform specifically. But then there's also tons of terrible wrestling games. I think it's really easy to make a bad wrestling game. And then the modern kind of 2K games, I think they're fairly well liked, but they've got their harsh critics for sure. I kind of wanted to select Giant Baba in this, but when I've played him before, he looks like a tall, lanky E.T., which I guess he kind of does in real life as well, but in the game it really does. The texture they've used on his chest and his body is very, very E.T. So, I don't know, it just kind of put me off. And he's super slow as well, which, I mean, he's this big, tall, old guy, so that makes sense. But I thought I probably got to check out one of the Virtua Fighter characters, so we'll choose Jeffrey. I don't really love the addition of the Virtua Fighter characters, which I love Virtua Fighter. It's what the channel's named after, partly. And yeah, I'm a massive fan of it. And Jeffrey's super cool, and Wolf's, they're cool in the Virtua Fighter games. But I've got to be honest, I don't really like their inclusion in this. It just seems a bit odd. For a game that's so serious and is doing such a good job of trying to be authentic to the wrestling experience, having these two kind of larger-than-life cartoony characters, even though they are wrestlers in the Virtua Fighter games, I just don't think they really fit. And some of their moves just don't really feel like proper wrestling moves. And I don't know, I just don't think it gels well. I think there's a place for cameos, and maybe in like a very serious sports game. I don't know. I would have probably preferred them not being in there. Or maybe if they kind of modelled them to look slightly more realistic, or slightly less like their Virtua Fighter versions. I don't know. I just don't think they really gel. I mean, luckily, a lot of their moves are wrestling moves, and they are in the Virtua Fighter games, so they just kind of slot straight in. But I don't know, other ones. Maybe if I didn't know that Jeffrey was from Virtua Fighter and I just saw him as a character in this, I might just think he's, just an AJPW wrestler that I've never heard of, which, to be honest, is most of them. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not going to be playing the Virtua Fighter characters in future, I don't think. I'm going to be sticking with the proper guys. So I think overall my impressions of the game are just wildly positive. I wasn't really expecting this when I saw the game and I picked it up. It was kind of the novelty, really. It was this Japanese pro wrestling game that featured Virtua Fighter characters. I thought that was weird. I hadn't heard of it before. It was just something I spotted, and I thought it was interesting. And I think it cost me £5. It was nothing, basically. And yeah, it was a novelty. It's one of those novelty purchases. But I've come away with it going, this might be one of the better wrestling games that exists, and I'm definitely going to play tons of it. Like, it's really cool. I was expecting it to be bad, but I've been pleasantly surprised. The caveat of like recommending to play it is that you need a Sega Saturn that can play Japanese games. So you either need a Japanese Saturn or you need a modded Saturn. You need to find the game, and you need to be able to buy it. I mean, that's not the easiest, but I'm sure you can find it online. If you've never played Saturn games that aren't from your region on your Saturn, it's actually really easy. You can really easily mod an action replay cartridge so that you can play Saturn games from any region. So I'm playing this on a PAL Saturn, a UK Saturn, a Mark 1 Sega Saturn, and I've just got a little modded action replay stuck in the back of it, and it lets me play games from any region. There are some 50 hertz versus 60 hertz weirdness with that. This game's probably actually running slightly slower than it should be, even though the speed of it looks great and it feels great to play. It's being a Japanese game, it's a 60 hertz game, and the PAL Saturns only support 50 hertz, so that means that the Japanese games often run slightly slower, but that normally just mirrors how fast PAL games normally play. PAL games are normally slower than their NTSC counterparts. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is it is actually quite easy to play Japanese games even if you don't have a Japanese Saturn. So if you're interested, do look into it, because it's worth having a bash, because there's a lot of games like this that are only released in Japan, and I think they're interesting. The Saturn's a great console for Japanese games. So that's AJPW featuring Virtua. I don't know why they didn't have featuring Virtua Fighter. Maybe there's some weird thing where All Japan Pro Wrestling didn't want the word fighter in the title. I don't know. It's featuring Virtua, and I think it's completely brilliant. I'm so glad I picked it up, and I can't recommend it enough. If you're into wrestling, particularly if you're into Japanese wrestling, and you like wrestling video games, I think it's one of the best. I'm blown away. So I'm going to stop waxing lyrical about that, and yeah, leave you with this nice game over screen. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a future video. All right, bye.